Namandavas, 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 namandavas. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in for today's October Shotsuki Hoyo. Also, we're observing the Buddhist Women's Association Memorial and Eshinni, the wife of Shinran, her memorial, as well as Kakushinni, Shinran's daughter. So I'd like to begin with an opening reading. If you'll please join me in Gassho. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to him, the exalted one, the enlightened one, the supremely awakened one. As the sun shines upon the earth, awakening into growth the seeds that lie dormant in the soil, may the light of truth cast its splendor upon the minds and hearts, that they may continue to guide this nation and the world with great wisdom and deep compassion. May this same light shine upon us all, giving us the insight to realize that all life is one, that we may constantly strive for the well-being not only of ourselves, but also of all peoples everywhere. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you. Now I hope everyone at home has their obutsudans open, a candle lit, and some incense burning. I would like to begin with the sutra chanting of the Sambujo, and if you have the PDF of the large purple service book, you can find it on page 23. This will be followed by a dedication reading, and then the chanting of the Sambutsuge and the Jusege. Sambutsuge is on page 77, and the Jusege on page 91. And during this time, we'll begin scrolling the names of the families who are observing memorial in the month of October. So when you see your family name, please go before your Butsudan, burn some incense, put your hands together, and recite the Nembutsu. Namandavas, 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 namandavas. Today, on this occasion of the Monterey Peninsula Buddhist Temple, October Shotsuki Hoyo, in observance of the Buddhist Women's Association Memorial and Eshinni and Kakushinni Memorial, the Sangha has reverently come before Amida Buddha with deepest reverence and thankfulness for the all-embracing wisdom and compassion of Amida. We reaffirm the three homages. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I go to the Sangha for guidance. Namu Kia Boots, Namu Kia Ho, Namu Kia So, Nam Mandamus, Nam Mandamus, Nam Mandamus.
不sai小兵生不教小学がし成仏道妙小長十法空教未小門生不上小学利欲人少年上映修凡行死具無常道一生天人死人力現代語不詳無才道少女産業名交際集約難外知恵源名士根の安寧即小悪道通達全宗門高僧上満足気よろ十法日月修十期天後音部元二周解放像公正空読法超大集中説法四四空空有一切物空即修徳本願熱出上満徳一三概要如仏無下地通達未武将願学営利都市最小尊死が若か大仙の感動国小天人道真如家ナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブ何しぐのぐ妙のせいさい道本もないしんおじょあんだナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナモアミダ仏ナモアミダ仏ナモアミダ仏ナマンダ仏ナマンダ仏
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to ask you all to open your service books to page 224 for the Gatha Nori no Miyama. Nori no Miyama no sakura bana mukashi no mama ni niyou nari muji no shiori no ato tomete satori no takane no haru o miyo Nori no Miyama no honto to 私のままに名乗るなり麦よは夢ぞ短よと驚きさます声を聞け。Thank you very much. And now, if you'll please turn to page 10 for the reading of the Threefold Refuge. Difficult is it to receive a human form, now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Dharma of the Buddha, now we hear it. If we do not cross over to the truth in the present life, in what life shall we cross over? Let us with sincerity and true reverence take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we together with all sentient beings awaken to the great way of enlightenment and to the unsurpassed intent of Amida Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we together with all sentient beings enter the storehouse of the Dharma, becoming like the wisdom ocean. I take refuge in the Sangha. May we together with all sentient beings become units in true accord, in harmony with all things. The peerless, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rare to encounter, even in many hundreds and thousands of kalpas. Now we are privileged to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of the Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you very much. Once again, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for tuning in today to our Monterey Peninsula Buddhist Temple October Shotsuki Hoyo. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the Buddhist women, formerly known as the Fujinkai members, both past and present, who over the years supported this temple in so many different ways. It is impossible to document or to express the gratitude for all that the women have done to make this temple what it is today and allow it to continue on its course. You know, the history of Buddhism and the history of Jodo Shinshu cannot be told without talking about the women in Buddhism. From the very beginning, with Shakyamuni's mother, Queen Maya, who nurtured the child through the pregnancy and gave birth to this child that would become the Buddha. Sadly, Queen Maya died soon after the birth of the Buddha, and it really was her death that prompted Siddhartha, the young Siddhartha, to contemplate the transient nature of human existence. Siddhartha was then raised by his mother's sister, his aunt. And Siddhartha's aunt, she raised him with loving kindness and compassion, qualities that Siddhartha learned to emulate at a very early age. And then there was Yosadatta, the wife of Siddhartha, who taught him the joys of parenthood and family life, and gave him a son. Later in life, after the Buddha's enlightenment, both his aunt and his wife, Yosadatta, became devoted followers and supporters of the Buddha, become the very first to enter the order and become nuns. Now we fast forward to the 12th century in Japan, where Shinnon shook the very foundation of Buddhism by openly marrying his wife, Eshinni. In retrospect, this was a very brave and bold move by Shinnon. He openly displays his true and real self, his desires, his passions, by honestly being true to himself, knowing that Amida accepts him just as he is. Now, at the same time, it was also just as brave and just as bold a move for Eshinni to marry a priest. Now, we don't think of this today very much because marriage in our Jodo Shinshu tradition is pretty commonplace. But for Shinran to marry someone would be like for the Pope today to break his vows and marry, and taking on a wife. But I want to focus on how very brave, incredibly brave, it was for Eshinni to marry Shinran. Can you imagine the looks, the talking going on behind her back in Kyoto at that time, when it was unheard of to marry a priest? And yet she endured. And I believe she endured and stood firmly next to Shinran because, like Shinran, she had a deep and abiding faith in Amida Buddha. And she had a deep and abiding faith in Shinran himself. And it's very clear from the letters between these two that her faith in Amida Buddha was not just an utterance of Namo Amida Butsu, and not just an obedient wife following her husband. She clearly understood the difference between Jiriki, or self-power, and Tariki, or the absolute power of Amida, which is the core of a diamond-like entrusting. So Eshinni-sama's life must have been very difficult. First of all, being the subject of criticism and from the world around her, but also traveling with Shinran when he was exiled to Echigo, living up in a cold, desolate place with her 7 children, and then later being separated from Shinran and some of her children, traveling between Echigo, present-day Niigata, Inada, present-day Tokyo area, and Kyoto. Must have been grueling. It must have been taxing on her body because they had to walk all the way. And it must be noted that in their travels, there were some places where she was not welcome, where celibacy was still being practiced and women were not allowed into the temples. So having to give up his celibacy, Shinran and Eshinni were not welcomed in many of the temples along their travels. We note in her letters she was separated from her grandchildren. Now, many of you who have grandchildren, are able to see them. Well, maybe not now so much because of COVID, but before you're able to see your grandchildren, travel to go see them and be with them. But here, Eshinni was separated from not only some of her children, but her grandchildren. And she writes often asking about them. Now, it is believed that Eshinni died at the age of 87 or 88 in that area of Echigo or Niigata in 1268, some 6 years after the death of Shinran Shonin. Many years ago, Reverend Hirano and I took a trip to that Niigata area and visited the gravesite of Eshinni, a simple grave, 5 stones piled on top of each other. A stone pagoda is where her gravesite is. Now, I do understand that this has since been upgraded and new buildings and things are there to honor Eshinni. But I want to share with you from the life of Eshinni, one of her letters, a part of one of her letters. And she's writing to her daughter, Kakushini, in Kyoto. And she says, "Although I never told your father about the dream in which I saw him as an incarnation of Kannon Bosatsu," this is the Bodhisattva of compassion, "since then I never regarded him as just an ordinary person and continued to serve him. I hope that you too will appreciate him in the same way. Thus, regardless of how he died, I firmly believe that there is no doubt about his birth in the Pure Land. And I understand also that Masukata was at the bedside of father's death. Even though they were bound karmically as father and son, this is an especially significant karmic happening. When I think of this, I am very pleased and happy. Okay. This is just a part of one of her letters. As you can tell, Eshinni really admired and held Shinran in great esteem. Briefly, I'd like to talk about their daughter, Kakushinni. She was the youngest of the 7 children. And she stayed back in Kyoto with Shinran and cared for him until his death in 1263. And Kakushinni, like her mother, had a deep respect for Shinran and a deep faith in Amida Buddha. And she, more than anyone, is responsible for us being able to receive the teachings of Shinran and the Nembutsu today. She established the mausoleum holding the ashes of her father. That became what we know today as Honganji. And she entrusted the Monto, or the followers, to maintain this mausoleum, creating a system that is responsible for the growth and the maintaining of the Jodo Shinshu tradition. So because of Kakushinni and her dedication and efforts, we have the teachings in our life today. So we can be truly grateful to these women in the past, from the time of the Buddha up into Shinran. And if we fast forward to the Meiji period, the 1880s, there was a lady by the name of Takeko Kujo, born to the Monshu, Koson Otani. And in 1904, she helped form what is known today as the Fujinkai, or the Buddhist Women's Association. She establishes Kyoto Women's University. She establishes humanitarian projects following the 1923 Kanto earthquake. And in 1925, she helps establish a free clinic that later becomes Asoka Hospital. So once again, fast forwarding to 1951, when the Monterey Peninsula Buddhist Women's Association was established. Its first president, Fujiko Kodama, continued the legacy of remarkable women with whom we would not have this temple or the Dharma in our lives. Today we remember all those who died in the month of October. We also honor Eshinni, Kakushinni, all the women in the past, including the members of our Buddhist Women's Association. We call it a memorial because we need to be reminded. We need to remember their sacrifices and what we inherit from them. Not only do we inherit this beautiful temple and the teachings of Shinran and Shakyamuni Buddha, but we inherit their hopes and dreams that this tradition will live on and that generations from now will be able to hear this wonderful teaching. And it is all due to the sacrifices of so many people, including members, but today especially we remember those in the Buddhist Women's Association. And it was because of their faith in the compassion and the wisdom of Amida Buddha that they carried on throughout the years. So it is my hope that we honor them, not only today, but always, by continuing to realize their hopes and dreams and pass on those hopes and dreams to new generations. Thank you very much. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you. Now I'd like to share with you the Gobunsho. Shinran Shonin taught that the essence of Jodo Shinshu is Shinjin. The reason is that by abandoning all other practices and completely entrusting ourselves in Amida Buddha, our spiritual rebirth is assured by Amida through the inconceivable power of the primal vow. This is known as entering the ranks of the truly assured at the very moment of Shinjin. Thereafter, all utterances of the Nembutsu should be understood only as expressions of gratitude for Amida's assurance of our spiritual rebirth. With reverence, I remain. Shonin Nichiryu no go kanke no onomuki wa shinji no motte honto serare soro. Sono yue wa moro moro no zogyo nage stete Eshinni-sama ni kimi o sureba fuga shigi no ganriki to shite mun no kate yori ojo wa jijo sashimeta mo sono kurai yo ichinen poki nyu shoujo shiju tomo shakushi sono ue no shomyo nenbuta yorai waga ojo o sadame tamaishi gonhojin no nenbuto kokoro mekinari anakashiko anakashiko namandavas namandavas namandavas. Thank you very much. Before we close today, I want to make a couple of announcements. The next 3 Sundays, October 18th, October 25th, and November 1st, we will continue with our live streaming services with our minister's assistants. And next month, on November 8th, we'll observe the November Shotsuki Hoyo service, and that will also be our Eitaikyo Muen Hoyo service. I'd like to thank Larry Oda and Hans for being our technical folks here in the studio. That is the Monterey Peninsula Buddhist Temple studio. Now I'd like to ask you to join me in the Gatha Ondok-san 2 on page 220. Our life is filled with warmth in sharing life with others. It is a simple truth to learn, but a difficult practice to fully realize. In personal life, it means to act by placing ourselves in the position of another. And in community life, it means to give service with joy and gratitude for the betterment of all. The practice of making others happy is based upon the clear understanding of life, which is oneness. In deep gratitude, let us realize this oneness of all life, the heart of which is compassion. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you very much, everyone. This will conclude our October Shotsuki Hoyo and BWA Memorial service, and I want to wish everyone good health. Please be careful. Don't forget to wear your masks and practice social distancing. And please, please, please don't forget to vote. This is important that our voices be heard, even though it's not really our voice, but our pens be heard on paper. And that we vote and submit our ballots and take part in this democratic action. So please be well, take care, and vote, please. Thank you very much. Namandavas, namandavas.